Okay, for this fly, we're going to tie a parachute March Brown. This is a good fly that I like to use in the spring when the larger mayflies are hatching. So I'm using a size 14 2x long dry fly hook. I've got black thread. I'm going to get my thread back here to the back of the hook. Snip my excess thread, and next step will be to cut myself a small patch of elk hair here and put that in as the tail of the fly. So I'm going to put that in the hair stacker, get the elk hair so that it's all the same length, put that on as the tail. There we go. Okay, my first wrap is loose. Once I get all the way around, pull tight. And my other wraps, I just work back. All right. Okay, so that's going to be the tail of my fly. We may end up doing a little bit of work on the tail just to maybe minimize some of that elk hair. It might be a little more than I need, but for now we're going to leave it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to tie in this tiny piece of flashabou, and we won't use that right away. However, we will use it as we work on this fly. So next step, take my thread up towards the front, and we're going to tie in the parachute post. And for this we're going to use elk hair as well. So I'm going to get myself a nice clump of elk hair here, snip it, and get it cleaned up and placed in the hair stacker. Okay, so I'm going to take that elk hair and tie it. Notice this is a little different. I'm tying it with the elk hair facing forward because we're going to turn that into a post here in a second. But once I tie it on, I'm going to work back with the thread, working back towards the tail end of my fly here. There we go. And I should be able to gather that stuff up and snip the elk hair. Got a few things to clean up on that, it looks like. Okay, I'm going to use my thread to fasten that down a little better, or not fasten it down, but just kind of hide that elk hair. There we go. And now I'm going to come up to the front, up where the elk hair is, and try to get that bunched up a little bit better. So we're going to wrap around it. Elk hair, sometimes when you're using as a post, does not cooperate quite as well as like a poly yarn or something, but it does work. Just have to be, you have to be a little more careful with it. It likes to do its own thing. Get a little bit of a front built up so that that post will stick straight up. And okay, we're looking pretty good. Now I'm going to get my thread back here to the back again, and we're going to use some dubbing. I'm going to use some brown dubbing here. We'll tie that in and dub right up to the parachute post. Again, when you're putting dubbing on your thread, you always twist in the same direction. A lot of times I'll use a dubbing wax, or sometimes I'll just lick my finger a little bit to help get that dubbing tightened down a little bit nicer onto the fly. So, okay, so we're ready to wrap forward now, and I'm going to bring my dubbing forward. What I'm going for here is a little bit of a larger taper as the fly gets towards the front. We want it to taper to be larger, just giving that outline of what a mayfly's body looks like. Once I get up here to the parachute post, next thing I'm going to do is grab that little piece of flashabou that we tied in, and I'm going to wrap that the opposite direction of my dubbing. Oh, and it snapped. I'm going to have an awful short piece to work with. It must have had a knot in it or something, but we're going to use it. This might be a little more challenging. I'm going to wrap that little piece of flashabou forward. And really what that does is it gives that body a little bit of a ribbed look and gives it a little bit of flash, which is also, I think, helps the fish see it. So once I get that up to the front, then I will tie that off. There it is. Okay, there we go. Now the next step is to tie in a piece of hackle. We're going to use that hackle and wrap that around the post. So I'm going to use some brown hackle. Sometimes I'll use grizzly, but today we're going to use brown. Okay. Now before I wrap that hackle, I also have this black thread up here that I need to cover with a little bit extra dubbing. So I'm just going to put a little bit more on there, and we will use that little extra bit of dubbing to cover up the thread, give this fly its nice silhouette, and usually I'll wrap a wrap of dubbing around the post as well. I think that just helps it. One thing it helps do is when I go to wrap my hackle, it's going to make that a little bit easier. So now that hackle will stick into that dubbing a little and just makes it a little bit easier. Okay. Alright, and to tie it off, I just try to pull back all of those hackle fibers so that they're still involved, still a part of the fly when I'm done here. Tie off that feather. And there we go. Now the last step, I'm going to whip finish this fly and snip my thread. Okay, there it is. The Parachute March Brown.